The image of Jesus we know today, blonde and blue-eyed, may be one of the greatest illusions in history. But what is behind this representation? Over the centuries, the figure of Christ has been reinterpreted, shaped by cultures and conveniences. However, new evidence is emerging, revealing a very different face to the one imposed on us. Anthropological studies and archaeological discoveries are beginning to paint a more faithful portrait of Jesus, a man who lived in the Middle East and who probably had very different characteristics from what Western art shows us. And why did the Church choose to create an image so far from reality? What's behind this choice? As we delve into this mystery, prepare to uncover hidden secrets that challenge what we know about history. Could the truth about Jesus' appearance change the way we perceive him? Follow us on this intriguing journey, where every detail can open doors to new revelations. What do we really know about the man who changed the world? In the first century, the Middle East was a mosaic of cultures, ethnicities, and traditions. Jesus was born in a region marked by political and social tensions under the rule of the Roman Empire. The Jews, the people of which Jesus was a part, lived a complex reality, mixing religions and customs. Jewish culture was deeply rooted in traditions and history, but also influenced by other civilizations around it, such as the Romans and Hellenistics. Jewish clothing at the time of Jesus was quite simple and functional. Men and women wore linen or wool tunics, depending on social class and climate. Clothes were usually handmade and often had neutral colors. Men also wore a cloak, which was an important piece of protection against the cold. The physical appearance of Jews at the time, including Jesus, was typically Mediterranean, characterized by olive skin, dark hair, and brown eyes. The physical characteristics common among Jews at that time were quite distinct. By modern standards, it is likely that Jesus was of medium build, with a slender body, due to the active lifestyle he led. The diet of the time, based on cereals, vegetables, and fish, also influenced their health and appearance. Furthermore, religious practice and local customs shaped not only behavior, but also personal presentation. The socio-cultural environment in which Jesus grew up profoundly influenced his teachings and interactions. He spoke frequently about values such as compassion, solidarity, and social justice, themes that resonated with the struggles of his people. Living with different ethnic and social groups gave Jesus a broad view of the human condition, which was reflected in his preaching and parables. These historical and cultural factors are essential to understand the figure of Jesus, not only as a religious leader, but also as a man of his time. His message transcended barriers, but its roots are deeply linked to the context in which he lived. Knowing this environment is essential for a richer appreciation of his life and work. The Gospels, which are the main sources on the life of Jesus, are not concerned with describing his physical appearance. In fact, references to his appearance are scarce and often vague. Instead, the texts emphasize his actions and teachings. This raises questions about how important appearance was to authors of the time. They seemed more interested in conveying spiritual messages than in describing Jesus' physique. Some ancient texts, such as Paul's letters, do not offer details about Jesus' appearance. This may indicate that his image was not central to the faith of early Christians. However, there are references in non-canonical works that try to give an idea of what he could have been like. A famous example is the Proto-Evangelium of James, which mentions Jesus' mother, Mary, but says little about him. The scarcity of details about Jesus' appearance also leaves room for various interpretations over the centuries. Some artistic traditions portrayed Jesus with European features, while others showed him with more Middle Eastern features. This diversity of representations reflects not only the imagination of the artists, but also the cultural realities of their own times. Furthermore, the few descriptions that exist are often the result of oral traditions and later interpretations. For example, an apocryphal description mentions that Jesus had long hair and fair skin, but these characteristics do not correspond to the standards of the Jewish population at the time. This illustrates how perceptions about Jesus were shaped by different cultural contexts. Therefore, the lack of concrete information about Jesus' appearance leads us to reflect on the importance of his message to the detriment of his physical image. What really matters is the impact he had on people's lives in the history of humanity. The figure of Jesus transcended his physical appearance, becoming a symbol of hope and faith for millions. In recent years, anthropological and archaeological research has gone deeper into reconstructing the appearance of individuals who lived in the time of Jesus. Through osteological analysis and skull studies, scientists have been able to draw a more accurate profile of what people were like at that time. These studies are based on graves and human remains found in archaeological excavations in the Palestine region. One of the methods used involves skull analysis, which allows researchers to estimate characteristics such as face shape, skin color, and even hair type. Although it cannot be said with certainty what Jesus looked like, research suggests that he would have had characteristics typical of the Jews of his time, with an oval face, straight nose, and dark curly hair. Furthermore, analysis of living conditions in first-century Palestine shows that most people lived in rural communities dedicated to agriculture and herding. This suggests that Jesus, like many of his contemporaries, had a body shaped by physical labor, which contrasts with some artistic representations that show him as a delicate and slender man. Studies also reveal how the environment and diet of the time influenced health and appearance. With a diet based on local products and an active lifestyle, it is likely that Jesus was a robust and healthy man. This vision contrasts with the image that many have of him today, which is often idealized and far from historical reality. These scientific investigations bring a new perspective on the figure of Jesus, helping to deconstruct stereotypes and better understand the context in which he lived. By looking at anthropological and archaeological data, we can get a clearer idea of what everyday life was like in Palestine, and consequently, how Jesus fit into this scenario. Christian art has played a fundamental role in shaping the image of Jesus over the centuries. From the earliest Byzantine icons to the best-known works of the Renaissance, the depiction of Christ often reflected the physical and cultural characteristics of the artists who created them. Thus, we often see Jesus portrayed with European features, light hair, and fair skin, which have nothing to do with the appearance of the Jews of the first century. This ends up shaping the image that people have of him, influencing not only art, but also faith and devotion. Artists throughout history have sought to humanize Jesus, making him more accessible to the public of the time. Through facial expressions, clothing, and scenarios, we sought to create an emotional bond between Jesus and the faithful. However, this humanization was often distant from historical reality. Artistic representations derived from specific cultural contexts can lead to a distorted view of who Jesus really was, contributing to the perpetuation of stereotypes that do not represent the diversity of the world. The iconography of Jesus has not only influenced art, but also literature and cinema. Films and books often resort to these traditional representations, reinforcing the idea of a Eurocentric Christ. This creates an image that, despite being popular, does not correspond to the historical truth. In popular culture, the figure of Jesus is often associated with characteristics that are not in line with his cultural roots, creating a disconnect between the image and the message he preached. Furthermore, art and iconography also have a strong impact on the way communities see themselves in relation to Jesus. For many, the representation of a Western Christ can lead to the exclusion of people from other ethnicities and cultures who do not see themselves represented. The result is a monolithic picture that ignores the rich tapestry of traditions and experiences that are part of global Christianity. The way Jesus is portrayed in art influences the way people understand their religious identity. Those who feel disconnected from the traditional image may have difficulty relating to the figure of Christ, which can affect their religious practice and the way they live their faith. Art, therefore, is not just an aesthetic question, but a question of identity and belonging that deserves careful reflection. The promotion of a specific image of Jesus by the Church was not a mere aesthetic issue, but involved a series of theological and social motivations. From the first centuries of Christianity, the Church sought to consolidate its influence and power, and a family representation of Jesus helped solidify that position. The image of a European Christ became a tool to communicate the Christian message in a way that resonated with the faithful of the time, but this also meant moving away from Jesus' true appearance. Political issues also played a significant role in shaping this image. With the expansion of Christianity and its establishment as an official religion in various parts of the world, the Church adapted the image of Jesus to align with the expectations of rulers and the elite. This alliance between the Church and political power meant that the representation of Jesus often became a reflection of the ideals and values of dominant society, rather than being a faithful representation of his origins. Furthermore, imperialism and colonialism contributed significantly to the spread of the Eurocentric image of Jesus. As European powers colonized different parts of the world, they took with them their interpretation of Christianity, including the image of Christ. This not only homogenized the perception of Jesus, but often marginalized local representations that could challenge this view. The result is that the figure of Jesus was used as a symbol of power rather than a model of humility and service. The Church also intended to create unity among the faithful, and a common image of Jesus helped achieve this goal. However, this unity often came at the expense of the diversity that characterizes Christian experience around the world. By promoting a single image, the Church not only silenced diverse voices, but also perpetuated the idea that only one version of Jesus was valid, excluding other interpretations that could enrich faith. The traditional image of Christ promoted by the Church continues to have significant repercussions in contemporary times. Discussions about the representation of Jesus are increasingly in focus as communities seek to revisit their identity and their relationship with the central figure of Christianity. This reflection is crucial for a more inclusive and pluralistic understanding of faith, which recognizes the diversity and richness of the traditions that make up Christianity around the world. The image of Jesus that we have today is much more than a simple artistic representation. It carries with it a cultural and social weight that resonates in different communities around the world. For centuries, the figure of Christ has been adapted to local realities, and this in turn influences people's religious identity. For many, seeing Jesus represented in a similar way to themselves reinforces the idea of belonging and connection with divinity. Thus, the interpretation of the image of Jesus can shape the way communities see themselves and relate to their faith. However, this image often does not correspond to historical reality. The representation of a Eurocentric Jesus with Western characteristics can alienate people from different backgrounds. For many, this creates a barrier between the figure of Christ and their own identity. The idea that Jesus doesn't look like them can lead to feelings of exclusion and distance from the faith. This disconnect not only harms the personal relationship with the sacred, but also affects how communities see themselves in a world that, in many cases, values appearance and conformity to specific aesthetic standards. Furthermore, the image of Jesus has a significant impact on racial and social issues. In many cultures, the depiction of Jesus as a white man can reinforce racial stereotypes and social inequalities. This image can perpetuate the idea that spirituality and divinity are intrinsically linked to European characteristics, thus marginalizing other expressions of faith and spirituality that do not align with this standard. This can create a vicious cycle where communities of color feel forced to conform to an image that does not represent their reality. The repercussions go beyond questions of identity. They can affect the social and political dynamics of communities. The image of Jesus has been used throughout history to justify actions of domination and exclusion. Groups that see themselves represented by this Eurocentric figure can, unconsciously, perpetuate inequalities and discrimination against those who do not fit into this model. Thus, the construction of the image of Jesus can have tangible consequences on social relations and the fight for equality. It is essential that communities reflect on the image they have of Jesus and how this shapes their own identity. The search for more inclusive and diverse representations can help dismantle harmful stereotypes and promote a deeper understanding of the figure of Christ. By recognizing the plurality of experiences and interpretations, communities can find a space of acceptance and understanding that reverberates positively in their social and spiritual interactions. And so we reach the end of our journey for the true face of Jesus. Throughout this video, we uncovered how the image we know can be far from historical reality. Through studies and discoveries, it is clear that the figure of Christ, as the Church shaped it, may have been influenced by very specific interests. But what else could be hidden in the shadows of history? What other truths about Jesus and his message might be hidden, waiting to be discovered? Imagine if the answers were hidden in forbidden texts or ancient forgotten traditions. What if the true appearance of Jesus was not just about his physiognomy, but also about his essence and teachings? What can we learn about ourselves by confronting these challenging truths? The question remains, are we ready to accept a new vision of who Jesus was? Don't forget to leave your comment. What do you think the Church hasn't told us yet? And what other conspiracy theories about biblical figures would you like to explore? Continue with us on this search for hidden revelations and ancient mysteries. The best is yet to come.